I had a yoga practice, and it was just like I was going to hot yoga. I was,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting snatched.
Yeah.
It was like, it was all the physical. I was just like, woo. But then when I needed it the most, in a moment that I was breaking, I experienced trauma, it was abrupt. I knew that this practice had a purpose that was bigger than just a workout.
That's Peloton yoga instructor Chelsea Jackson Roberts. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you find this conversation or any others you've heard valuable, I have a favor to ask. Consider leaving us a review so we can keep bringing you more of the conversations you love. If you don't know, here's how to leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, go to the Everyday Better page, scroll down to ratings and reviews, and click the number of stars you want to give us. Then right below that, click Write a Review and add your note to us. On Spotify, go to our page, click the 3 dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. We so appreciate your feedback. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. As regular listeners of this show will know, I'm in the midst of one of the biggest changes a person can experience in life, becoming a parent. My husband and I are expecting our first baby any day now, and once she arrives, yes, we're having a girl, I'll be taking a little bit of time away from the show to adjust to life as a new mom. Don't worry, you'll still hear me in conversation with a fascinating guest every single week, like always. But you'll also hear from my 2 wonderful producers, Grace and Emily, at the top of the show, setting the scene for what's about to come. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to them, and I'll be back with you in just a few.
Okay. Hi, Grace.
Hi, Emily.
How are you feeling? Are you ready to step out from behind the producer's desk?
I'm feeling okay. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Although it is weird that Leah is not with us here today in the studio.
It is very weird. We're rarely here without her. But if she was here, I think she'd start this by saying how excited she is for today's guest.
Totally. We are always psyched every time we book a new guest. But when Leah heard that Chelsea Jackson Roberts was officially coming onto the show, she freaked out.
Yeah, she slacked us just her name, all caps, lots of exclamation points.
So for those of you who don't know, Chelsea is a Peloton yoga and meditation instructor. One of her most popular classes on the platform is a gospel flow class. Chelsea joined Peloton in 2020, but she's been teaching for much longer. Her first job out of college was actually working as a public school teacher, and then she went and got a PhD in educational studies from Emory University. In between undergrad and grad school, Chelsea also became a certified yoga instructor. And so she started integrating yoga into her classroom teaching. In 2013, she founded the Yoga, Literature, and Art Camp at Spelman College, which is her alma mater. It's a tuition-free program for teen girls to read and write, learn yoga, and build community.
So on the day Chelsea came into the studio, there was crazy traffic in Midtown. She actually texted us to say she was running a few minutes late, which, like, no big deal, happens all the time, especially in New York. And we build extra time into all of our interviews just for this reason.
Chelsea doesn't know that, though. So when she came in, she was a little flustered and worried that maybe she had, messed up our timing.
Yeah.
And then while Grace and I were doing final tech checks before officially starting the interview, Chelsea and Leah started talking about how someone can practice, let alone teach, yoga and meditation in a place like New York, where there's always traffic, there's always something crazy going on that you just can't prepare for.
And to that point, Chelsea had a lot to say about how yoga and meditation are what enable her to be in New York and still live a balanced life, despite all the hecticness and all the things that are out of our control.
So that's where we're going to pick up from. Here's Chelsea.
When I first started practicing yoga, I was so happy, to find, to tap in. Like it's a moment that happens when you're like, oh, they got bit by the yoga bug, they got bit by the meditation bug, and you can see that aha moment when it all connects. That's what I think about people who don't think that yoga and meditation is for them, or if they live in a fast-paced city, it's not for them, and they think that they have to go to Bali or they have to go to a retreat, and then I can do yoga.
Right.
Then I can do meditation. I'm like, no, girl. Let's start it now. The yoga begins now. The yoga can begin in this breath right now. We can both close our eyes, take a deep breath. The yoga is here. Yoga is simply union, to join, to unite. And so whenever we have that connection, our mind, our body, our actions, our words, when all of that is in alignment, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because my teacher, Swami Jayadevi, would always say, like, it's easy to go and take these tools and go and live in the mountains or go and live away from the spaces that may trigger you, the spaces, the everyday. But the work really happens when you can bring both into the same space. So where I can make my way through New York traffic to get here, right? Knowing that, oh goodness, now I'm late. What is this self-talk that's happening? I'm an overachiever. That was one of the reasons why I started practicing yoga, to be kinder and to be more generous to myself, because I was so used to putting out into the world and getting rewarded for that. And so when you take a personality like that, a work ethic like that, there's going to be a breaking point at some point. And for me, yoga was that safe space that I could figure out how to be both, how to do both, how to make the space for rest and kindness and generosity towards myself, and still achieve and still do tremendous things out in the world that people see and reward and I get praised for, and that's great, but I don't want to be attached to it. So I think that's the hardest practice and the most rewarding to me, to be the both and. I say that a lot, to be the both and. It doesn't have to be either or. I don't have to be like this angelic meditation instructor who floats into a room. I can be somebody who's moving through New York traffic and find myself going to the edge of being like, oh no, I'm going to disappoint someone because I'm late. And then I pause. I go back to my practices. I take a deep breath and I'm like, who is that serving? Who is that serving if I have this conversation with myself as I'm on my way to have a beautiful conversation with you?
Yeah.
And instead, I'm going to use the tools that I have been practicing for over 2 decades as a way to be in the world and to be grounded and anchored.
I very much relate to the overachiever thing. I think also we were talking about where we were from. I grew up in California in the Bay Area, but a lot of the schools I went to were mostly white schools or didn't have many Black kids. So it's like that also added to the performance piece, because it was like, oh, I'm one of the only ones, so I better do good and I better stand out. And it's like I don't really have a choice to become like an underachiever, because then I'll prove everybody right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, I understand that.
Yeah. And so you get in that flow of like, how many times can I get the next like award, the next thing? And I was telling you earlier, I avoided yoga for a long time because I grew up as a track runner and soccer player. So competitive sports, again, performing, and like in track, it's just you know? And like if you're in on a relay, like, it's you and 3 other people. But it's just you running the race and everybody's looking at you. And if you win, you get the recognition.
Right.
And I was like, well, what happens in yoga? Like nobody's recognizing me. And also I was like, it feels soft. I was like, it's too soft. I need something where I can like, again, the self-talk, I can act like my own coach in my mind and be like, do it better, do it faster.
Right.
And yoga was the first time for me, and doing it with you was the first time I was like, okay, I'm willing to listen to someone say, like, you say a lot of things, but it's like a lot of self-love, a lot of like, saying things about like having power and taking your time and like the use of blocks and just things that I was like, no, that's a crutch. You need to be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's softened me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like this conversation. I'm always 2 blocks and 1 blanket. Grab them no matter what. 2 blocks. Because I want you to automatically remind yourself that you are worthy of support in any situation. So even if we're taking a 5-minute yoga flow that's a beginner level, 2 blocks in one blanket. Even if you've been practicing yoga for 50 years and you can do a handstand on a pinky, get 2 blocks in a blanket, because this may be the day that you need support, and for whatever reason you've told yourself that you're not worthy of that support, or that it makes you less than, or and I'm going to tell you, as I stepped into motherhood, especially, that was the reminder that I needed help and I needed support, and that I could not do this alone. Of course, I had a partner, but even outside of him, it's like you just need to be reminded. And for me, yoga and meditation was the practice that I went onto the mat and then I took it out into the world. And so that's why it's called a practice, so that when those moments come up, they now begin to be a little bit more automatic in your thinking. And so when I'm in traffic, stuck, looking at every direction, like, where can I go? Can I run out and have my Carrie Bradshaw moment and go skipping down the street? No, that's not an option right now. So instead, what option do I have? I have the breath. And I know that the breath never fails me. Like, I know that as long as I can breathe, I am okay. And that is a message that I try and share each and every time I'm on the mat or on the cushion. As long as we have that breath, we have a choice. We have an option. And so that is also the direction that I go with, reminding ourselves that we're worthy of that support and help.
Yeah, I can remember a time where I don't remember what class it was, but it was one of your classes where you said grab the blocks, and like you don't really I didn't realize that yoga could make me emotional when I first started doing it. I was like, no, I'm just going to do some stretches. It'll be nice. Like maybe I'll break a sweat. And at one point when you said grab your blocks, I remember just starting to cry because it was actually like a metaphor for the fact that like I don't grab blocks a lot in life, you know? And like I don't ask for support. I thought that if I asked for support, I was weak or help or told people I was struggling, there's like a weakness, and you don't want people to see that. So like I'd rather just do the thing and pretend, and then I'll go home and deal with the fact that like I might feel like I'm struggling.
Yeah, that's beautiful that you named that, you had a resistance almost to it, or not even a resistance, but you had a reaction, a response to something that may have surprised you. And I think that I say resistance because a lot of people will have resistance towards yoga and meditation because it makes them feel uncomfortable in their body, because the first time in a long time, they may have slowed down. They may have gotten so quiet that they are listening to the things that the body remembers. Even if your mind is saying, nope, I don't need to rest. Nope, I don't need this break. Nope, I don't need help. Your body is remembering. And so what yoga does, especially if you have a teacher who is speaking the things that are tapping into your heart in a certain way, you're now embodying everything that you have experienced in life on the mat. So when the class is all over and we get to that shavasana, that's usually where people have those breakthroughs and they cry or they laugh or they're angry at me. And I say, go ahead, be angry at me. I can take it. I've been angry at the yoga teacher before. And it's just because they typically have said something that has hit me in a way that I'm like, whoa, I did not know that that was buried. But thank goodness that it's coming up now, because if it's coming out in this way, imagining what it would be if it just stayed stuck inside of me forever. I always talk about with yoga, we want to create the least amount of harm as possible when we practice. And when I think about harm, I think about injury. When I think about injury, I think about honesty. And if I'm not honest with an injury that I may physically have, what's going to happen? If I continue to use that part of my body, it's probably going to get worse. I may not tell anybody. I may be able to endure the pain. I'll wince. I'll do the things. And people may say, is something wrong? Those are the things that start to come out. People will know, what's going on? Because after a while, you can't hide it anymore. And to me, yoga brings to the surface the things that we would rather keep hidden sometimes. And that's including our joy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to tap into our joy. Yeah. It was hard for me for a long time to be happy because I was afraid that happiness was going to be taken away. And it was just like, I remember the moment that my yoga and meditation practice shifted. It was in my early 20s. I tragically lost one of my best friends to gun violence. She was my roommate at Spelman, and we were 24 going on 25. And it was in Atlanta. And I remember I had a yoga practice, and it was just like, I was going to hot yoga. I was, I was getting snatched, honey. It was like, it was all the physical. I was just like, woo. But then when I needed it the most, in a moment that I was breaking, I experienced trauma, it was abrupt, I knew that this practice had a purpose that was bigger than just a workout. And I started to notice how the practice was putting me back together again. And so I remember, as a result of that trauma, I was afraid to be happy, because I was just like, well, Misty is gone now. And that was my best friend, and we had happy times together. Or you go through a breakup and that person is gone. I'm not going to ever date again. Or anything that happens that creates this feeling of helplessness, hopelessness is trauma. And if we feel like we are overwhelmed by that trauma and we can't move, then you kind of have those responses to trauma: fight, flight, freeze. You just don't know what to do. And my whole thing was to fly everywhere. I would leave. Like, even if stuff started feeling good, I would leave. I would go. When I first met my husband, he was the kindest, most generous, most handsome, like all these things that I didn't think that I was worthy for, but I was afraid, because I was like, he's going to do something and then he's going to be gone. And it was just like, joy was hard for me to even face and tap into, because I was afraid it was going to be taken away. So yoga has helped me interrogate the parts of me that I would rather be hidden.
So you mentioned Swami earlier, and I've heard you mention Swami a lot in your classes. Swami has said it's easy to go into the mountains and go live. And that took me a long time to get. Like for a year, I was like, should I be somewhere else, somewhere more peaceful? I had friends who lived in Colorado, all over the place. So I love that you're talking about the fact that real practice is actually being in places like this and finding and creating yourself, and coming back to whatever your practice is, whether it be yoga or meditation, to actually be here, but also for you to spread the light and the joy that you are meant to spread. Right? If you were away and doing something else somewhere else and people couldn't get to you, it'd be a very different experience. So there's so much power in the fact that you've made this choice, power for yourself, that you've made the choice to say, I'm going to stay here and do this.
I wanted to make sure that I use my luxury of having choice as a lifeline almost for people who don't have choices. I have the choice. My husband and I have the choice. Are we going to move to New York to pursue this Peloton thing? Are we going to stay in Atlanta? Are we going to move to LA? We had choice. But I think about people who may be able to connect to my meditations, who don't have a choice, who have to live exactly where they are in horrible situations, excruciating situations, and they've got to figure out, how do I make a life out of where I am right now? And I'm always grounded in the fact and reminded of my ancestors as a Black American, where my origins are in the South, and just knowing what my ancestors went through. I'm always reminded everybody doesn't have a choice. So with that, how can I provide a space of solace? How can I provide a space of reminding ourselves that we have tools within us as well to find joy in this lifetime? And so, it's when I think that I don't have choices, I remind myself that there are so many human beings who don't have the choices. So why not? How dare I not share those tools to support them through that?
Wow.
And with this particular work that I'm doing with yoga and meditation, I was like, I got to be with the people. I want to cast a net that reminds people that this thing exists and we belong. I want people to know that they belong, because I didn't feel like I belonged the first time I stepped into a yoga or meditation class.
Yep. The first time I went to a yoga class was a yoga class in the city. It was in Soho. I walked in and I was like, I don't look like anybody here. And the vision I'd had, which I often talk to people about this with meditation. I'm like, I know in your mind, before you start meditating, you think that you're supposed to be in white linens and have, long hair and be all natural and give up all these things that we do here in the United States or in Western culture. But that is absolutely untrue. Anybody can meditate.
I would never have started. That had to be a line like that. I was messy when I first started yoga.
Yes. And I was messy when I first started meditating. And like, I'm still messy at times.
I'm still messy at times.
Yeah. Like you never get to a point where you're like, I'm perfect or I've arrived. It's just an unfolding.
Yeah.
But I felt that way about yoga where most of the time I saw women that looked a very specific way. It was mostly white women. It was mostly women who were very thin. It was mostly, it's things that make you assume who you have to be to go to yoga.
Right.
So I was like, well, I guess I'm a sports girl, not a yoga girl. And so the first time I went, I didn't see anybody like me. And I never went back to that class because I felt really uncomfortable for like a few different reasons. But I was like, this isn't it.
Yeah.
And, when I found you, and the reason I was like, I went directly to you is I was like, oh, I've never seen a Black female yoga teacher. And like, wait a second, this is where I think I need to go. Not just because we look alike, but because I want to feel like I'm welcome where I'm going.
Yeah.
And then to join your class and see how you talk about the fact that like everybody is welcome here. Anybody can do yoga.
Yeah.
It completely changes how you feel in the class. Because you give yourself permission to just be you and not have to perform against what you see that maybe you'll never look like that or be like that. And you don't want to, but you want to feel like you can show up as yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You want to belong. You want a sense of belonging. And anytime that I've been in a space in which I didn't feel belonging, it has definitely lingered with me and been extrapolated into other situations. So if I'm like, well, I'm not worthy, I'm not this way for this space, and then it's probably going to be applied somewhere else. And so that's why I think that yoga and meditation in particular are great places to start, especially if someone is struggling with their even self-efficacy, their self-esteem, their self-worth, because it first can feel uncomfortable, but it's something about that breakthrough. And once you get to the other side, the way that it unlocks so many things that you may not have noticed or didn't realize why there was resistance or why you were stuck, it may change your perspective and the lens in which you use in other situations. And that's what it did for me. Like, I don't think that I would have been a person to even take a chance in living in New York City, being a yoga and meditation teacher, had I not been a yoga and meditation teacher.
Wow.
And the practice impacted me in that way.
Coming up, Chelsea reflects on her experience becoming a mom and on how yoga and meditation have helped her to be more present for the joys and accepting of the challenges that come with motherhood. We'll be back in just a few moments. And we're back with Peloton yoga instructor Chelsea Jackson Roberts.
Just a heads up, there will be discussion of pregnancy loss and postpartum depression in this conversation, so please take care while listening.
So I want to switch a little bit because you're sitting down with me in what is going to be our maternity series.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about like your journey and becoming a mother and also the ways that yoga has supported you through that.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, just for people who don't know, like, can you share a little bit about your journey to motherhood?
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
I think about, so my son, he just turned 2 in September, at the end of September. And Sane and I have been married for 10 years next year. And our son is 2,
Wow.
And so we took our time. And there was a moment where I was just like, do I want to be a mom? There it goes again with choice. And I'm glad that I had this luxury of like, do I want to have a child? And it was like, yes. And it was like a roaring yes. And then I experienced loss right before we had Noble, which is an entirely different experience. It was very early on, so it was just like this glimpse, this glimmer. And so I knew that I wasn't going to stay stuck in the loss. I could acknowledge it. I could give it its space, its time. But if I would have stayed there, I know in my personality, I would have never have seen Noble. Like, I would have never have had the confidence, the wherewithal. Again, going back to that trigger of like, I don't want to experience joy because it's just going to be taken away. And instead, I had to rely on my yoga and meditation practice. I had to remind myself of Chelsea 20 years ago when Misty was tragically taken. And I was just like, I'm just here. I don't want to be happy because it's no point. And so I know that yoga and meditation has strengthened me and supported me in being a mother and having the confidence and the strength and the courage to be a mother. And now I see, after all of that, the hardest part, the most challenging part is what happens beyond the pregnancy once they're outside of you, because I have an issue with control sometimes.
You and me both.
And
so you're saying I should get ready for that.
And it's going to be beautiful. I never want to be that mother who's like, ooh, just you wait. Just you wait. No, just you wait.
Yeah,
it's
I love
amazing.
That. Yeah.
All of it. All of it. The challenges, the obstacles, the beauty, the things that I didn't even know existed. That has been my journey. It is all of that. The challenges, the obstacles, and the beauty that I didn't even know could exist. It is the freedom that I see in him when he's running, and I'm just like, where I'm like, oh, and I'm like, no, he's safe. He's safe. He can run and be free. And so that was, for me, the challenging part. It was what happened once he was beyond me, once I could not control where his body was at all times. And so that's where the challenge, even in this moment, like, I experienced postpartum depression. And it was important that I stay connected with my therapist and stay connected with my practice, because it was beyond me. I didn't know what was going on. It was hormonal. It was all these things. And that was very new for me. But I'm going to tell you, Leah, it has been the most beautiful, like, I can't even put into words the beauty that I experience daily with seeing Noble smile every time he wakes up in the morning. Not every time, because sometimes he's grumpy. He's a full,
he's a human.
He is a full human being that I hope understands that it's okay for him to experience the fullness of his emotions. His dad and I, my husband and I, we show the fullness of our emotions. Of course, everything is developmentally age appropriate, but I also don't hide if I'm sad or if he's seen me cry. I'm not going to go into a room so that he can only see his mother in one version of always being happy, always being put together, because that's not true. And the one thing that I'm not going to do is create these rose-colored glasses for my son to live in, because that's not safe for him. And so this has been my biggest assignment. It has been what the yoga, in my opinion, has been for. It has been this ultimate experience of me mothering myself, parenting myself through this. I had to learn that while I was expecting. While I hope that you are finding ways to be a mother to yourself first. Whether you had an outstanding, incredible mother or one that you were yearning for more from, like whomever's listening out there, I think it's important for us to develop our own relationship with how we will parent, with how we will show up, not just for our child, but for our partner, for ourselves, through it all. And so my journey has been one that has strengthened me beyond. It has reminded me of my value. Like, I feel not that being a mother has made me more valuable, but I think how I'm responding to the unexpected in motherhood or parenthood has made me realize how valuable I am. And so it's beautiful.
I love
it's
that.
all the things. It is absolutely everything. It makes me excited to wake up in the morning. And I used to miss that in life with whatever it was that I was doing, and it became so familiar. I even said that in a class one day. I was like, start to notice when a posture becomes familiar, your association with it. Like, how, like, is it like boring?
You adapt to it.
You're adapting. You may take something for granted because you're so familiar.
Gosh, yeah.
Parenthood ain't nothing familiar. Every day is a new day. Every age, every stage is a new day. And I am so grateful to be able to experience that.
Wow. I mean, you said value. I'm like, we were talking earlier about being overachievers and about it's like, you have every degree everybody would want, And so you're doing all these things that give you this like external sense of value, I imagine. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of people who aren't really in touch with themselves to recognize that, like, those aren't real.
Right.
So I'm curious how being a mom has shifted that sense, that kind of like back and forth of overachiever, my value's out here, and wait a second, my value is inherent.
I do believe that it's very unique, my experience being at Peloton, to where, especially you found me during the pandemic, where we became like these celebrities, where I became like noticeable or people recognize me on the street, still do. And that has been wild, especially as a yoga and meditation instructor. But the thing that keeps me grounded is that Noble doesn't care who people think I am. He doesn't care if there are millions of people looking at mommy at any given moment. Like, that's not what matters right now. What matters is that I am a fully functioning human being, parent to this little child while I'm around him, while I'm not around him, that I'm making choices that remind me of, I don't want to say responsibility or duty, because I think that women in particular, we allow that to guide us and it takes us away from ourselves. But I think it was a calling for me in being a parent, because I think it's what I needed. And for it to be aligned at a time where people actually put me on a pedestal in many ways, that was not welcomed.
You weren't looking
that was
for that.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah,
that's uncomfortable for me. But while I'm being put on a pedestal in one space, I'm cleaning up poop off of my hand and underneath my fingernails in the other instant. And that's what makes it so beautiful. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that both and, because it reminds me what matters. When at the end of my days, I am going to remember that I impacted people with yoga and meditation. But I think that the meaningful moments will be those moments that I experience in the intimate settings with my family, with my son, with my husband, with us figuring this out together. And so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
It just took me to a place of being like, yeah, how do I feel about all of this? Like, it
Not
is
to make it
wild.
a therapy session, but I am curious. Yeah,
it is wild. But I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up, and I'm going to show up not just for my child, but I'm going to show up for me, because I deserve this. I deserve to see this through, and I deserve the support as well.
I remember something you said about Sane saying, like, you don't have to carry all your stuff down to the car, kind of thing. Like, you don't always have to carry the load,
Yeah.
Like,
You'll be very happy, Leah, to see all of the things that can support you through parenthood. And I think that I was taught that, if you're not productive, if you're not doing something, you're lazy. You're not. The word lazy is so cringe for me. I will even check somebody who says, yeah, I'm just being lazy. I'm like, girl, stop. Let's erase that.
You're
like
resting.
that
Yeah.
is an internalized, especially parents, especially moms, especially caregivers. Like, how dare you? Don't you dare?
Don't do that
Not
to
lazy.
yourself.
Not
Yeah.
lazy. You're probably tired.
Right.
You're
Correct.
probably tired. And so I want to share that as well. As you navigate this new chapter, this this whole new portal that you're going to go through, that you're not lazy if you need to rest, that you are wise and attuned with your body. Because I often say this one too, that I got from my teacher. So this is Swami's teacher, Ma, who is my teacher as well. And she said, you have to drink as you pour. And so that means that if you are constantly pouring out, what are you drinking in? And you may need to do it simultaneously. So I don't get any days off. Even as I'm here with you right now, I don't get any days off of being a mother. So how am I drinking in as I'm pouring out? And so that's something that I hope that you have a relationship with, to figure out how you're going to drink as you pour.
I love that. Yeah. I want to just switch a little bit, because you've talked about joy, and I want to just hear your thoughts on how you really access joy, how you would advise people that they access their own joy, no matter where they are. If they're currently, you know, a mom and feeling like, or parent and feeling like, God, you know, like this is really hard, or they're in a situation at work where it feels like they can't access. I mean, all the things we have in life that close us off or make us never want to experience it, to your point, because what if it goes away? Like, how do you think about that today, and how do you access that?
Well, I know that one of my biggest things is therapy. I keep coming back to that, and I know that that is a choice, and also I say luxury because I know that everybody doesn't have access to healthcare or access to the resources to have therapy. But for those who do and may be resistant to it and maybe haven't found a therapist that they're aligned with, I found my biggest unlock was specifically about joy. And I had to acknowledge the spaces in which I didn't feel joyful or which I felt fear so that I could name it, understand it, and be honest with, is that happening right now? Because I continue to relive spaces in which joy didn't exist, where it was really, really hard for me. And because our nervous system is really strong, overpowering sometimes, I found myself in this loop. It's in yoga, it's called this karmic knot. When you continue to come back to this and you're like, how did I end up here again? Like whether it's a relationship, whether it's in your job, whether it's getting lost walking out in the neighborhood and you're like, how did I end up here again? Usually it's because I, in my situation, had not been honest with the spaces in which joy didn't exist and deciding how I was going to move accordingly. And so if that meant that I had to align myself in different situations, in different friend groups, in different goal setting objectives, in different, I had to have alignment. Alignment was key for me, not perfection, but alignment. So if I'm saying one thing, if I'm saying, Shane, I want to have a baby as soon as we get married. But I also want to, really, like, how are you going to do it? I also want to be a world-renowned yoga teacher. Like, I never said that. But if that were the case, if that were the case, like, are these things that my mind wants, are they aligned? And if they're not, they're probably going to create some tension and some not so joyful moments because I'm working really hard and the alignment's not there. And so working with a therapist has even helped me go into things in my childhood, of things that I didn't even realize impacted me.
As an adult.
Yeah. Because I was still living in that. And it's like this mantra of like, this is not the past. You are safe now. There may be something else that you need to be concerned with, but that thing that you let take you out of joy because you're afraid that it's going to be taken away, we're not there right now. That's in the past. You are safe now. And so my practice of joy is being grounded in the present so that I'm not jumping back in the past of what happened. And I'm not going into the future of what may go wrong. Instead, I'm here right now in this present moment. And that for me is where joy lives, in the present moment. Yeah.
And for people who are going, well, I don't have access to therapy or know how to get a therapist, one of the most powerful things I can offer, and I'm sure you do this a lot, is gratitude. And they've shown that like just even waking up in the morning and writing down 3 good things, from your head to your heart through your hands is like what Brene Brown says. It's like that is the way to be able to get yourself into a place of being in the present and recognizing what matters now. Similar to yoga. You can't I've never been able to not be present when I've been doing yoga because every movement, everything, if I can just sit in that space, I can feel the power of what it's doing for me to the point where like, and I'm sure I've had moments where I've cried on the blocks, but I've also had moments where I've just sat in child's pose at, points that you instruct that. And I'm like, oh, I could stay here forever. I feel
Yeah.
almost like it's like euphoric.
Right,
And like your
right.
body is doing something that
Yep.
you're not used to. I am not used to it
Yep.
doing and going, oh, wait a
Yep.
second. If I'm here, then I can feel these things. And
Yep.
if I invite them in, I can actually experience them
Yep.
versus pushing them away and trying to keep myself safe,
Yeah.
basically.
I'm so glad that you shared that.
Oh, of
that's
course.
what you've experienced in classes with me because, to your point of like not everybody has access to healthcare. I try and be as transparent as possible about therapy that I'm in because it usually will come out in my yoga classes. I know that I have a very unique, my person, So like when my therapist is talking to me, it's about my unique situation, but I can still use those tools as a way to integrate it into yoga. And for me, when people are not finding the yoga class that they like, to me, it's usually maybe it's the teacher that you're not aligned with. And that's no shade. It's really finding a teacher and go out there. You don't like give up on food because you taste something that you didn't like. You go and you try something else. And so my thing is that I always want to be that yoga teacher who's transparent, that I'm going to therapy, that I'm working on myself, that when I show up and y'all may be putting me on a pedestal thinking that I don't have any bad days, I do. And I use these tools to navigate them and get through them so that I can live in the fullness of my experiences, so that I can increase my capacity to be present with myself so that I can be present with other people.
I want to turn to some of the people listening to us now and just hear some of like your thoughts or advice. So I'm curious, like, what do you have to say to the person who is potentially considering having kids, but also, you mentioned before, I also want to do this with my career and that. And so I'm stressing about, and I'm speaking partially from experience. There are so many things I wanted to do. And my pregnancy was a surprise, not an accident, but a surprise that made me go, oh my God, what's going to happen to my career? What's going to happen to my life? I've been this one individual human, even though I wanted to be a mom, it's like that moment changes you. And then you go through your own process and everyone has it. What do you have to say to people who are feeling that like competing priorities, especially though for women who feel like I'm supposed to be able to do it all because I see other women doing it, maybe even thinking that you're one of the people doing it all?
I think about yoga. And I think about the first time that I saw yoga, and I think it was like a picture of Rodney Yee on the cover of a book, and he was doing some wild posture that I knew I would never, ever do. And I was like, look at him, but I know I want to practice yoga, but I can't do that. I can't. Remember that one time when I messed up my rotator cuff in cheerleading practice because I was doing a back handspring? Oh no, yoga's not for me. To me, that's anything. That's the new job. That's the moving to a new place, new city. That's parenthood. Our mind is really good at creating a laundry list of all the things that could go wrong. But what about the things that could go right, And I think about, like, especially with something that's unexpected, of like that moment of panic, that moment of like, and it could be the best panic. Like you can be joyful, you can be both and all in one, but it's still this abrupt flood of emotions and thoughts and everything. And that just gets back to like not living in the past of what went wrong. So that's when I experienced loss. When we tried again, it was like, I'm not going to live in this that went wrong. What if this goes right this time? And I know I just made that sound very easy, but that's why I practice yoga. And that's why I started with saying, I saw Rodney, you doing this posture, and I said, I can't do it like that. What if I would have said that and never, ever stepped into a yoga class? Stepped into that yoga class where nobody looked at me, and I said, I can't do it like this because in the past, I remember when I got teased because my hair started reverting, and it changed when I went to swimming lessons at camp when I was 6 years old, and all the girls laughed at me, so I don't want to sweat. Or, you know what I mean? Like all those things that can come into play that keep me out of that present moment. And my prayer, my meditation, my hope is that especially parents can stay grounded in the present moment.
You talk about, your loss and then also postpartum depression. I think there are so many things that women don't talk about and people don't talk about publicly that we have to learn on our own when these things happen. Like I personally experienced perinatal anxiety. I didn't know that was a thing. And so, what do you have to say to women who have experienced loss?
I said it when I announced my pregnancy on Peloton. It was just like this metaphor of like when a storm is there and all the clouds and it's so dark and you're just like, is this storm going to ever pass? Is it ever going to be sunshine? And I think about even in the community in the orb of Peloton, where I was never in a fitness community before. I was always in wellness. I was always yoga. And I was always, a lot of people were depressed. A lot of people knew that they were depressed. And I was like, yes, I deal with depression. They were just like so real about it. It was just like, that's what depression looks like.
What?
Wow. And I think that yoga encourages you to be so real and present with everything so that your life and world doesn't fall apart when the worst case scenario could happen. Instead, you're living in the fullness of your experiences. So you have the tools to navigate the fullness of your experiences. And so even in tragedy, I'm not saying to forget about it and to just be joyful and to toxic positivity. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what yoga does is it makes me real. It makes me honest. It makes me see the big picture that everything is not going to be perfect. And still I live. And we have a lot of examples of people who have overcome, not just by resilience, but by being tender and being vulnerable with our heartbreaking so that we can repair it. I often quote James Baldwin, and he's one of my favorite. This is who brought my husband and I together, the words of James Baldwin where he talked about using our own suffering and understanding our suffering so that we can understand the suffering of other people. And that is how we go deeper into love. There's no way that you can truly love if you don't have the fullness of what love is. And sometimes love can be heartbreak. I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
I was heartbroken. And how potent my love is for Noble, because this journey, I was fully aware the entire way and not blocking out something because it made me feel sad or uncomfortable. Instead, I confronted it. And for me, yoga and meditation is a kind and generous way to navigate all of life, all of it, not just the pretty parts, but all of it. And that to me is beautiful.
Okay, Chelsea, I'm going to have you answer these 3 statements and then we're done.
Yes, no problem. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been great. Better humans are
present. Yeah, they're present. Yeah.
Better work is
one in which you feel aligned, one which your heart, your mind, your body, like they feel aligned.
And a better world has?
A better world has connection, understanding. Like a better world has better be on its way. Yeah.
That's the best one I've heard. A better world better be here soon. Chelsea, thank you so much. This was
Leah.
Great. I'm thank you.
Happy for you. You got this.
I can't wait.
You are in your purpose. You are in your purpose.
Thank you.
Yes.
That was Peloton yoga and meditation instructor, Chelsea Jackson Roberts. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is hosted by Leah Smart and produced by Grace Rubin and me, Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. Tim Bolin mixed our show. Andres Cardona is our video producer. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Koop is head of original programming. And Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. Thanks for coming with us, and we'll see you here next week.